Hey there, thanks for joining me today. I'm very happy about this episode because I'd like to talk about something that I find very important. How to be articulate. What does that mean? I think a lot of us are getting lost in this new trend to sound like a native speaker, and there are so many videos out there on different ways to sound more advanced or more fluent in English. There's a possibility that we lose sight of what language is all about, and that's communicating. So if you have a tendency to use more advanced vocabulary, or you find yourself wanting to use more obscure vocabulary and phrases, idioms, I want you just during this video to concentrate more on what matters, which is being understood. Being articulate simply means that you speak in a clear way, that you are comfortable to listen to, and that you can convey your message. So obviously there are non-native speakers who are not very articulate for whatever reasons. It could be a grammar issue or could be a vocabulary or pronunciation issue. But the thing is that a lot of native speakers are also not very articulate, for different reasons. Some of them have a regional dialect. Some of them use idioms that are related to culture or regional events that the general public doesn't really know about unless they're from the same area. There's variation within every community. For example, I say envelope, my father says envelope. Both of those are accepted as correct. So we're going to go through 10 very simple ways that you can become more articulate and also more fluent and confident in English. So the first thing I'd like to mention is speed, the speed of your English. Did you know that every language has its own speed and some languages are faster than others? It's true. This is calculated by how many syllables are produced per second or per minute. And although English can convey a lot of information within a few words, English is a relatively slow language. You may not believe this listening to some people when they speak, but English is far slower than, say, Japanese, Spanish, Italian, Turkish. There are many languages that are much, much faster if you calculate words per minute spoken, or sometimes this can have an effect on your English or another language. Because if you tend to speak fast in your mother tongue, then you may try to also speak fast in English or another language. So sometimes it's good for people to slow down a bit and concentrate more on the pronunciation and the melody of the language instead of making an effort to speak faster. How do you do that? How do you check the speed of your English? There's a way, there's actually an app for that I found. It's called Speech Rate. So this is the Speech Rate app. It's free. I found it for Android. I'm sure there are different ones on the market. And what you can do with this app is you can record yourself. You just push down on the microphone button, as you see. Just push down on the microphone button and it starts recording your speech. So right now I am just speaking to you normally at my normal rate, and after maybe 10-15 seconds I can stop it and it will tell you how many syllables I speak per minute. And not only that, okay, so keep in mind English conversation speed is anywhere between 120 and 150 syllables per minute. Your goal should probably be to speak at a speed around this speed if you're speaking in conversation. If you're giving a presentation, it will be a bit lower. Presentation speed is between 100 and 150 words per minute. So as you can see here, it calculated that I speak 121 words per minute. That's including all the pauses I made and the fillers. And the articulation rate is 135. So the articulation rate means they took out all the pauses in my speech and they only calculated the time that I was actually producing sounds. So this app also has a line for For filler words, and these are the words you use like when you're thinking, these words that don't carry much meaning, and we try to reduce them in English, obviously, to sound more prepared or to sound more fluent, but this is something that can be very useful if you have to prepare a presentation and you want to keep a speed that is very similar to English. Usually when there's a problem with understanding non-native speakers, it's not the problem that they're speaking too slowly, but that they're speaking too fast. When we get nervous, we speak faster. Sometimes we just think we're slow, so we speed up our speech. But my advice would be to really try to speak slowly and clearly. When you think about how you feel when you listen to other English speakers, isn't it nicer when they speak slowly and clearly? Isn't it so much more comfortable than if somebody's speaking very fast? Speed can also play another role if you're giving a presentation or speaking. If you want to express some kind of urgency about a situation, you can speed up your speech. And this has an effect of grabbing your audience's attention. On the other hand, if you want to express the seriousness of a situation, you may slow down to make it sound more serious. This could be a device you could use, speeding up and slowing down, to make your speech sound more interesting to the listeners. So my second tip in general is to record yourself and to listen to yourself speak. This is important for several reasons. The first reason it's important is because no one likes listening to their voice. Okay, when people hear their voice, they think, God, is that me? I don't sound like that from my ears when I'm speaking. But the thing is, if you get accustomed to hearing your own voice, you'll feel much better about speaking when you do have to speak. If you're used to your voice, if you're used to how you sound, then you will be much more comfortable speaking. Another reason it is a good idea is because it gives you a record of your progress. So if you record yourself today and you continuously learn English, then maybe in a few months, 6 months or so, you can listen again and you can identify your progress. And this also gives you extra motivation to continue your speaking skills and to continue practicing. There is another very important reason I want you to record yourself, and this is for my third tip. I would like you to also listen for those filler words you use, those habits you have when you speak that maybe don't sound so eloquent, like when you pause, maybe when you pause you think out loud and say and these make you also sound a little bit less confident. And if you can reduce them, it would make a big difference in how your message is perceived. My next tip is about pauses. So a lot of people when they're speaking and maybe they're thinking about a word or they don't know how to phrase what they're saying, they will pause. And this makes us feel like we're on the spot or that people see that we're not very fluent in the language, but the truth is that pauses are not that bad. If you listen to speeches, you'll see that they are used intentionally to get a certain effect from the listener. For example, if you make a point during your speaking or during your talk, often articulate people will pause for a moment to give their listener time to think about what they just said. So someone once gave me some good advice. They said if you're giving a presentation and you forget something or you pause for a long time, you shouldn't apologize because in fact the audience doesn't know that this is unintentional. And if you pause for a few seconds, then the chances are that your listener will simply think that it's done for an effect. Unless it's super, super long, like a minute or something, it's better to relax than to fill that pause with some filler words or to look nervous. My fifth tip that I want you to think about is pronunciation. I'd like you to think about the rules of English pronunciation when you practice your speaking in English. This is a really hard one because when we're born, we already have an idea, we can already recognize our mother tongue. We learn from the very beginning what the rules of our mother tongue are in terms of the melody of the language, when words are emphasized, what the intonation is like. And then when we grow up and have a language course, we're taught by the teacher that these rules don't apply to the new language. So this takes a lot of time to learn. I would recommend when you learn new vocabulary or when you practice your listening skills, pay attention to the pronunciation. It's as important as the meanings of the word. So if there's a word like organization, you can hear which syllable has been pronounced, and slowly you can pick up on these rules in the language. Sometimes there's a rule, sometimes there's not a rule. But if you look in the dictionary, you can normally see that the stressed syllable is marked by an apostrophe, or sometimes there's a little speaker symbol and you can hear the intonation. When you do listening practice, when you learn new words, write down the word that you hear if you've learned it through listening, and also mark the stress that you heard. And pay attention to this and keep a journal, even keep a journal of this if it helps you learn the intonation of the words. And sentences also have a specific sentence stress. So our words are normally stressed when they are content words. The important words are stressed, and the grammar words or articles, prepositions, these small words are normally weak, which means we don't pronounce them as strongly. So this is why we have reductions, like we say, I want to go, or I'm gonna do it. Going to becomes condensed because it doesn't hold very much content in the sentence. This is something you should also pay attention to. I don't think you need to learn these reductions that are more colloquial. Like if you give a presentation, it's fine to use the long forms, especially if it's more formal. But slowly pay attention to the rhythm of the language, because this is also different from language to language. And there's a great chance that in your language, the sentence stress is very different from the sentence stress in English. The sixth thing I want you to pay attention to is the fact that English varies in pitch. So sometimes we raise our voices higher and sometimes we drop our voices lower. And this is used also in presentation skills or in everyday conversation in order to sound more emphatic or to get someone's attention. I know a lot of languages are quite monotone, so for example, if they don't have very much pitch, they don't go up and down, then it has the effect of being boring when you're speaking in English. So if I were just to talk like this to you right now, it would put you to sleep, right? So when you're speaking, it's very important to raise and lower your voice, not only the volume, but also the pitch. You can hear this when we use question tags, right? So if I say, for example, the meeting starts at 5 o'clock, doesn't it? My pitch rises at the end, and then you know it's an actual question and you want an answer. But if I were to say something like, oh, it's cold today, isn't it? You see my voice drops, and that means I'm not asking you a real question, I'm just starting a conversation with you and making a statement. So there are examples when the rising and falling of your pitch really makes a difference in how you sound. So the next thing I want to talk about is something that may seem a little obvious to you, and that's the volume of your speech. If people have often told you to speak up or speak louder, or they didn't catch what you said, then you might want to train yourself to raise your voice a little bit so that everyone can hear you. So one way you could do this is when you record yourself, just stand farther away from the microphone. Just stand a bit farther and then it'll force you to speak up. You could also do this while you're practicing speaking. You can speak farther away from your speaking partner so that you have to project your voice. Usually people speak too low rather than speak too loudly, But if you speak too loudly, you can do the same thing. You can stand close to the microphone. My 8th tip is to prepare thoroughly before you are in the situation where you have to speak a lot. How can you do this? For example, if you are going to an event and you more or less know what you're going to be talking about at the event, what kind of topics are going to come up, you can write down vocabulary based on this topic. You can brainstorm all of the things that might come up and also the vocabulary surrounding this topic or these topics. Play out the conversations in your head before they happened so that you feel confident going into the situation. You don't have to do a full-on grammar review if you're going to be in a social situation, but I think it's important to review some vocabulary, make sure you know it. Maybe you can look at some videos on related topics to pick up some new vocabulary. If you're going to be talking about maybe recent activity, for example, you might want to refresh the present perfect tense or the present perfect continuous if you like, just so that you sound more secure going into this situation. It'll make you feel, if you're prepared, it'll make you feel more confident. The 9th thing you could do to become more articulate and a more articulate speaker is to prepare questions going into a situation. So this can be questions that are relevant anywhere. Think of questions that you could ask anybody, and not only that, think of follow-up questions to those. For example, if you ask someone, what did you do last weekend? That's something you can ask anybody. Then you can brainstorm different answers they could give, and based on those answers, you can think of follow-up questions. Oh, what happened? Would you recommend it? Who did you meet? How long did you stay? Just keep going on and on brainstorming these questions, because questions are something you can always use to get out of a situation. If you feel like you've had enough talking, then it's nice to become a listener by asking people questions that they have to answer. And if you have a lot of follow-up questions, then it takes you off the hook for a longer amount of time. Just keep the conversation directed on them. And if you've prepared the questions, first of all, then you'll also know how to respond to the questions if they ask them back to you. And my final tip is not to be too hard on yourself. If you have an accent or if your English isn't perfect or fluent, this is fine. The vast majority of English speakers today are non-native speakers. If you have a foreign accent in English, it doesn't mean that you can't communicate well or that you can't learn to be articulate, even if you're at the intermediate level. Think of all the people who have learned English later in life and went on to be very successful, despite having a heavy accent. Think of Arnold Schwarzenegger. He started learning English as an adult. He's been the governor of California, he was a movie star, and he still has a heavy, heavy Austrian accent. Think of Jackie Chan. If you've ever heard him speak in a film or give an interview, you know that his English is not very fluent. He makes grammar mistakes. He does fine. Sofia Vergara. She has such a strong Colombian accent. Imagine if that kept her from going to auditions or applying for jobs or giving interviews. We all have accents. Native speakers have accents. Whether you can recognize it or not as a non-native speaker, we all speak a certain way, and the key is to learn how to grade our language in different situations, formal and informal. In my opinion, that should hold much more weight than trying to take on a specific English accent. So the next time you're struggling to understand someone who's speaking English and you feel like your English isn't advanced enough or you can't understand them because you haven't studied enough, I want you to consider that the issue may not be so much on your listening skills, but it's probably on the fact that they can't articulate correctly, even if it's their mother tongue. I would like to hear from you in the comments if you found the app useful, or if you maybe have another idea of how to become a more articulate speaker. Thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.